Hello, everybody. I'm Haseeb at Dragonfly Capital, and today I'm bringing you an amazing DeFi panel with many of the technical leaders from some of the most important projects in DeFi today. So we're going to go through and have quick introductions. So starting with Amir, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me today. I am co-CEO of DEX Labs. We build decentralized exchange technology across a variety of different layers, but yeah, kind of the most important piece being DEX protocol, which is an aggregation and liquidity protocol more tailored towards professionals.
Next up, we have Michael.
Hello, my name is Michael. I'm the founder and CEO of Curve Finance, and Curve is automatic market maker for stablecoins and similarly priced assets. Well, at least for now. And yeah, so that's about it.
Next, we have Sergej.
Hi everyone, my name is Sergej. I'm co-founder of 1inch Exchange. 1inch Exchange is here to save time and money, so it's a DEX aggregator, and with additional protocols like next generation AMM, Uniswap, and more are incoming. So that's for me.
We have then Shane.
Hi everyone, I'm Shane from Kyber Network. So Kyber is a fully on-chain liquidity protocol that helps to connect many different unique liquidity sources into a single on-chain endpoint for aggregators, dApps, wallets, and even end users to use for their liquidity needs. Very nice to be here.
And thank you, Shane. And last but not least, we have Lucas.
Hey everyone, this is Lucas from Tokenlon. Tokenlon is a decentralized exchange adopting a request for quotation architecture, and we are built on top of DEX protocol.
Excellent. And special thank you to Tokenlon for organizing this and bringing this event together. So, so each of you are builders working at different layers of the DeFi stack. Some of you work on primary markets and other of you are aggregating over those primary markets. One question that I have that I'm curious for you guys' perspective on is who owns the customer relationship in DeFi? Is it going to be the protocols that own the customer? Is it going to be the aggregators who own the customer? Is it going to be the wallets who own the customer? Is it going to be the exchanges that own the customer? What do you guys think and why?
I would maybe start. So from my point of view, the application which is most user-friendly. So right now, we see, of course, Uniswap, they have like 20K people every day swapping because the user interface is really great. Yeah, but sooner or later, all the people will recognize that more efficient ways to use, like aggregators, for example. We are like also one of the biggest ones who own like 1,000 to 2,000 people every day swapping on 1inch, and of course there are wallets. A lot of people use wallets, and they don't want to spend time, yeah, to go somewhere else or investigate different and find the best place to exchange, for example, yeah, or lend money. They would like to use the most user-friendly application. That's my statement.
Michael, do you guys have thoughts?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Amir. Amir, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I very strongly agree that in the long run, I think it's going to be aggregators for the most part. You know, there are just so many different decentralized exchange protocols out there, in particular automated market makers these days. And just from a user's point of view, like you don't want to have to understand all these things, you know, figure out where the token you want exists, you know, how the pricing mechanisms and all these work. You don't want to trust all of these things individually with your funds. So I think in the long run, like aggregators will most likely end up owning the user. You know, I think that's kind of one set of customers. The other would be like the liquidity providers. I think that's a bit more of a nuanced answer. I mean, I think you can certainly create moats around liquidity, but we have also seen that it kind of can come and go very easily depending on where the incentives are.
Yeah, I guess I would give a little different perspective on who owns the customer. Of course, if the customer is the one who exchanges, yes, I think DEX aggregators is the way for those customers to come in. But there could be many aggregators, and the one aggregator which wins would be the one which integrates the best sources of liquidity, or maybe the most of them, but there is another side of it. So the DEX aggregator is just the demand side, but there is also a supply side, which is basically users who upload the liquidity. And for that, what matters? Two things. One is safety of the protocol. So if the protocol is safe, then my pot of liquidity which I upload there is safe, and I would prefer that one. But there is also the efficiency. So there are protocols with different efficiency for different assets. For example, Curve is very efficient for stablecoins and things like Bitcoin to Bitcoin. And for cryptos, we have I don't know, Uniswap, Uniswap, Sushi, and also things like Bancor, Dodo, whatever. For those ones, the efficiency could be defined as like how much yield do you get per given like their existing price fluctuations, and how deep the liquidity is given those fluctuations. The yield matters for liquidity providers, and the depth of the market for the same liquidity matters for the demand side, for the aggregators. You may think like if you, let's say, if you wanted to compete with existing AMMs, like there are really many of them, right? And let's say if you take Uniswap, it's actually a very good example. Too bad we don't have Uniswap on the panel, but it's a good example because there are forks, and there is a pretty much one-to-one fork of the algorithm SushiSwap, and you can actually see like how much does the brand and the UI gives, what advantage does it give to the technology. And basically the trading volume to liquidity ratio is about 2.5 times larger for Uniswap than for SushiSwap, which means that like this is the brand premium. And this means that if somebody wants to compete with Uniswap, they probably would need to be at least 3 times more efficient. So that's kind of the perspective I've learned recently, and just happy to share now.
Yeah, I think hearing everybody's opinions on this, I mostly agree. I think when it comes to adoption in DeFi space, it's always especially when it comes to liquidity, it's a two-way street. Definitely, you have to take into account how, if you look at the customer as developers, like you guys, you would think of the protocol as very, very crucial in terms of the kind of products you can build for your customers. But you look at the customer as the end users and traders, sure. I think at the end of the day, in the long run, I also agree that users and traders are looking for platforms which allow them to get the best, most competitive prices. So, I mean, from our own experience at Kyber, when we first launched our own interface to our protocol back in early 2018, right after the ICO, we realized that we were servicing mainly the traders, right, the end users that come to our platform to trade. But through calls, through discussions with more developers in the Ethereum ecosystem, through conferences, we realized that, there's so much, there's a huge potential to increase the whole taker network, and that will also benefit the liquidity providers, especially professional market makers that want to come into the DeFi space, they're always looking at how big your taker network is. So you can't have one without the other. And who owns the customer, it really depends on like how do you define like the customer. If you're talking about end traders, then aggregators, very good UI platforms. If you're talking about the customer being developers building new products, then it's the protocols.
Well, so that leads me to another question. Actually, Lucas, I'd love for you to take this one, and I'm curious whether people have ideas. A lot of people touched on the difference between the supply side and the demand side, and noting that there's very different dynamics between the supply, meaning very often the liquidity or the market makers, and the demand, which is the end users who are trading and the customers. As Lucas, you do growth at Tokenlon. How do you think about bringing on the different sides of the market, and which of the two sides of the market is harder to get on board?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and maybe for this question, I can kind of relate to your last question, because my perspective is kind of different. Because I believe that whichever product has a higher switching cost for the user will actually own the customer. So, for example, for the normal users who are not technical, I believe for them, actually they value the user experience a lot. I believe the user experience is kind of underrated in the space. So for them, this is what we learned from natively integrating within the mToken wallet. So for example, we have for Tokenlon, we went through multiple versions. We changed our underlying architecture and even the protocol. But majority of our users, they don't really notice, they don't really care, as long as we are still providing a price in a reasonable range. So I think there are some value that users give to the user experience. So I would say for the mainstream users, or 80% of users, front end like wallet actually owns a lot of value here. But for the technical users, for the people who know smart contracts, it will be different. They seek numbers. They always want the best returns. For them, I think the protocol or the aggregator will be the most important for them. And asking your second question, I believe the user side will be, or the demand side will be actually the hardest one for the products today, because there are many developers, and especially after this DeFi summer, we see many new products coming out. And I think the most struggling part for them will be to attract the users, because maybe they can have some good VC backing them, good funds backing them, which help them to kick off the liquidity. But for those, doesn't guarantee the users will come. So they will have to have maybe introduce yield farming, things like that. But it's also hard to make sure yield farming is sustainable. So that's what I believe in general.
I'd love to hear from the aggregators on this panel. Lucas, you touched on the fact that many of these liquidity platforms are doing liquidity mining. Many of these new startups that are in DeFi are doing liquidity mining, but they really struggle to bring on the demand side. The supply side seems to be easy enough to, incentivize to come on board. The demand side is hard. What are you guys seeing when you see these new up and coming projects? What's working? What's not working? And are there any patterns that you're noticing?
Amir, go
Sergej,
ahead.
Amir.
You can start.
I think that they've proven that it is fairly doable to build large amounts of liquidity. I think if you go back a year in time, there was still this chicken and egg problem where you weren't sure if you needed the liquidity first or the demand side first. It kind of had to try to build both at the same time. I think today with liquidity mining, it's doable to build large amounts of liquidity, although I think it's debatable whether that's the most efficient way. But we are seeing pretty large pools of liquidity, I would say, that are not being effectively used. Like the turnover is very low. I think a part of that is probably just due to like the underlying algorithms of these AMMs and stuff like that. If they can build very deep liquidity, but not very tight spreads, then they're just like not going to ever be utilized by the aggregators in practice. Like you can say that, I have 40 different decentralized exchanges integrated, but like, 99% of the time, you're probably going to like 3 of these different exchanges, unless you're like a really huge order, in which case, it makes a lot more sense. But yeah, I think generally people are underestimating like what kind of liquidity they need in order to actually be utilized by the demand side.
So from my side, I guess
let me add a little bit. I will also shill 1 inch a little bit in this. So just from our experience back when we started in January, with we did have this algorithm, but of course we don't own we didn't have anyone to exchange yet. So we came to 1 inch, and I asked Anton and Sergej to basically connect Curve to 1 inch so that we have those trades incoming. And already with just, I think, $50,000 of liquidity, it was enough to kind of kickstart the things. And basically what made it possible is aggregators, like the 1 inch aggregator in this case. So aggregators do bring the demand, and it's actually very important for new projects to both have very efficient algorithm with tight spreads and to interact with aggregators, because that's what helps to start the things.
Yeah, I agree. So when we see any new liquidity sources popping up, we are happy, like on a Christmas. Small opportunity. We tried, so we integrated our liquidator. So we positions on Aave, so Compound and some others are coming, and Michael said, we organize the volume, we bring the volume to those projects, to those protocols, and the market itself, it finds the best and the more efficient protocol on the market. It chooses automatically, because like for example, we route only fair volume. So for example, we have our own AMM, Uniswap. So, and theoretically we could make more money if we would have same volume as Uniswap, but we don't have, so we have done this premium, what Michael already said as well. And we route only our fair volume. If there's opportunity to get better pieces of the liquidity for better rate, then we do that. But if it's not, we don't do that. So, and I see a lot of innovations in the space. Of course, there are some copies like Sushi, but still kind of also one step forward with experiments, with governance experiments, and so on and so on. And right now we have much more liquidity than a year before, yeah, and much more teams working on products, yeah, and this is great. Yeah.
So I'd like to ask a question now to 0x, Kyber, and to Tokenlon, because the 3 of you have primary market trading venues for potentially every asset in crypto. The question is token trading going to be a winner-take-all market among the 3 of you? So the aggregators, Curve, they're sort of, they don't really care who wins. And Curve is like, okay, well, I'm only doing particular pairs. So, whoever wins the other markets, I don't really care. But you guys you're direct competitors to each other. Do you believe that there's going to be one winner? Or if not, how are you going to differentiate in the long run? 5 years from now, are you still all going to be at different companies, or will you all be at the same company?
First of all, I just want to say we are not competitors with Tokenlon. I think this is
that's true. Sorry.
Where you have to ask like who the customer is here, and I think Tokenlon is one of our developer customers. We also have end user relationships with our own user facing aggregator Matcha. But yeah, I think the answer is definitely that it is not a winner takes all market. I mean, I think if you just like look at the exchange business throughout time, there are, at the end of the day, there are at least going to be a handful of different exchanges. And, I think that there are just too many different products out there, in a good sense, right? They're just so many, and they all will end up lending themselves to different types of liquidity models and stuff. And it's very hard to create a generalized solution that works well for all of these things. So, I think at the end of the day, it's highly unlikely if there's just a single solution that is able to eat the entire exchange market.
Yeah, I completely agree as well. Just to add on to what Amir was saying, so for Kyber network, essentially we're liquidity protocol, but we do have our own in-house UI, which is Kyber Swap. But that is just one of 100 over takers in our network. And 1inch is a major volume driver for Kyber as well. In fact, it has been #1. And if you read our monthly ecosystem reports, it brings in a lot of volume to Kyber. And similar to what Michael was saying earlier, it really helps new protocols as well find that kind of taker network. So when it comes to token trading per se, whether it's as a winner take all thing, if you look at just the end user, the traders, it might seem that they will just migrate to whichever platform that offers the best price. And you would think that DeFi users are always rational in the sense of like to make money, right? But if you look at some platforms in the space where there's other kind of value that they provide, Uniswap is very simple. It may not be the most capital efficient when it comes to liquidity provision. Even for token trading, like advanced users might want to go to 1inch or Matcha or Tokenlon, where they can get prices that are more competitive. But there are some of my friends who would stick to Uniswap because of the simplicity, or they were so familiar with it due to its branding, its take up rate in a DeFi ecosystem. Vitalik talks about them as well. So there could be many other value that platforms could bring. So there are definitely different platforms for different use cases and different users. So at the end of the day, I agree with Amir that in the long run, there could be people that prefer certain platforms from others, no matter whether rationally, if you think about just the pricing, they should be going to one. But there could be other platforms that offer other benefits.
Yeah, I also agree with Shane and Amir that it's really hard to have a single winner that takes all the market. But I feel at the protocol level, it's possible that a few winners can take the market. So for example, like you all mentioned Uniswap, because Uniswap is so has very good liquidity and supports so many tokens there. So probably everybody, like I believe Matcha and Kyber, they are all already integrating with Uniswap. And actually, for our newest version, we are also integrating with Uniswap. So it's possible for some asset classes, asset types, for example, the new tokens, everybody will just integrate Uniswap for liquidity of these new tokens. But I feel for the front ends or the exchange venue, it will be a lot harder to have a few winners because there could be many reasons. For example, users can have different preference in user experience. For example, users in Asia, they are mobile first. And also there can be regulation reasons that some exchange venue will have to stay in some jurisdiction area.
That makes sense. Michael, let me ask you a more pointed version of the question. Do you believe that stablecoin trading, or more probably mean reverting pairs, trading of mean reverting pairs, do you think that will be a winner take all market, or do you think there's room for a second besides Curve?
Oh, well, yeah, I don't know. Like the stablecoin or like mean return trading is just a small fraction of the market, I would say. And yeah, I don't know. Like if we stop innovating, we obviously will lose market, right? So we should continue. And I think I don't know. It's possible that in any market it could be either way. It could be one winner takes all, or it could be multiple things. And I think if someone will try to innovate on the algorithms to make them more and more efficient, they may have an opportunity to take the market. But at the same time, if you look at DEX aggregators, I don't think it's gonna be one winner takes all, because, well, at the end of the day, for the aggregators, it will be just the speed of execution, like speed of adding new things, and like, well, effectiveness of aggregation, but that's probably easier than keeping up with everything. So I don't know. It could be either way. But to stay competitive, one definitely should move forward and not stick with what worked.
I would like to add, it's like in the series Halt and Catch Fire. Did you see that? This is exactly the same. It's really, you halt and you catch fire. So you have to continue innovate. You have to improve your algorithms, and invent new things, solve problems. So, and it's similar like in the beginning of these browsers like Netscape and so on. So, and Yahoo, this is really similar to the time right now from our point of view.
Who knows? Maybe it will be some AI which invents algorithms and launches AMMs.
Well, so that actually, Michael, you were speaking earlier about SushiSwap. So I'd like to direct this question to you, Michael, and to Amir at 0x. Both of you have been subject to fairly high-profile forks in the past, and DeFi Summer, I think, taught us a lot about forking and the viability of it, where it goes wrong, where forking doesn't necessarily work. What have you learned first of all, I'd love to hear the story of what it was like when you experienced this fork firsthand. Like, what was it like to go through that with the protocol that you built? But second, what have you learned, and how does it make you think differently about taking your protocol into the future if you have another situation like that?
Yeah, I guess the key thing when somebody forks the protocol, they will always be a little bit behind. So if you keep innovating, they will not be able to keep up. Secondly, what really matters is the team, and if the team can provide can build really secure things which are safe, then I think you will still be ahead of the fork all the time. And it's not just the code, because like the fork, it just forks the code, but it's also execution. Like, do the decisions they make, are they safe? And the community, not necessarily the community always can judge whether decisions are safe or not. Sometimes they cannot, and really a big contribution comes from the team. And people can see when something is safe and when something is not safe. Another thing is incentives. For example, I think right now, total value locked in SushiSwap is fairly close to total value locked in Uniswap. Well, not kind of, still less, but not too far. And I think this is because SushiSwap has the liquidity mining program, and Uniswap right now doesn't. And of course, Uniswap has this brand, and many people know it, and that's what helps a lot. But SushiSwap is probably 75% of TVL of Uniswap at the moment, because SushiSwap has liquidity mining and Uniswap doesn't. And that's, I think, pretty important. Like if you, I think it's better to not, like if you had some incentives, it's better to not turn them off if you have forks. Otherwise, you could be in danger. I mean, it could work, but could not. And as an example, we had Swerve forking Curve, and right now they reduced their inflation in hopes that the token value will go up. And instead, what happened is that I think Swerve TVL is kind of 3% of Curve TVL. So that's why incentives are important. And in this highly competitive world, it's better to have them. So if you have a fork with incentive and the original without incentives, that's a dangerous situation, I think. So yeah, that's my point here.
Yeah, Michael, you mentioned about community. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to comment on Michael's point about the community. I think that's very, very important as well. I mean, if you just look at Ethereum, there are tons of ETH killers out there that technically, they do claim that their design is apparently could be superior, but the Ethereum developer community are not easily swayed just by certain grants or incentives on other platforms. There's a lot of, I guess it has reached a certain level of critical mass in Ethereum to present itself as a moat, right? Even if there could be a technically superior platform.
Yeah,
developers still want to be Ethereum.
Yeah, and I guess for liquidity sources, the community, the most important community is not only the end users, it's also the developers who integrate with your protocol. I'm sure you experienced that as well.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. Like you can fork the technology, but you can't fork the users. You can't fork the developers. You can't fork the community. I think when 0x got forked, it was a very different time and day. It's like the end of 2018 or so. And we didn't have a user-facing product, and we didn't have a lot of relationships with market makers and stuff like that at the time. So it actually was a larger hit. But I think at this point in time, it would just be much, much more difficult to fork. And honestly, I feel like these days when a protocol gets forked, it's almost a good thing for those protocols, because you now have another group of people who's working on very similar technology, and they're innovating, and for the most part this stuff is all open source, and the teams can kind of learn from each other. Like we look at SushiSwap, started off as a one-to-one fork, and now they're going in their own direction, and I think overall that's a really good thing for the space. And Uniswap still has all their users, right? So yeah, I don't think forks are actually an issue these days.
Well, how did going through that fork experience change your guys' perspective? Did it make you say hey, we need to have closer relationships with market makers, or we need to be more actively cultivating a community?
Yeah, it got us thinking a lot about just decentralizing all aspects of protocol more, right? There shouldn't be really concentrated pockets of liquidity or users. Ideally, if any single person left the system, ideally there is a kind of some sort of network effect, and the users continuing to use the canonical fork are still getting roughly equal value. So we definitely started focusing a lot more on liquidity at that point. I think that's when we first started thinking about 0x Mesh as well, which is a peer-to-peer network for sharing 0x orders. It just kind of creates this place where liquidity could aggregate, and liquidity becomes more of a public good for everyone building on the protocol, and it doesn't matter as much if a single person leaves.
Makes sense. So in all the discussion we've had so far, we've kind of talked around the elephant in the room, but the one major protocol that's obviously missing from this panel is Uniswap. And I think we all know that Uniswap has been the runaway winner in DeFi over the last cycle. And what I'd love to get your perspectives on is why. What explains Uniswap's runaway success, and what is your protocol in particular going to do to try to catch up to Uniswap? So I'd love if Lucas could answer this first.
Yeah, for sure. So I think for Uniswap, they are able to offer a really permissionless approach for listing the assets and allow everybody to trade on Uniswap is really a key for their growth. So for example, for this DeFi summer, there are many new tokens showing up, and people will naturally just go there to find a new token to trade. And for projects, they will just go there to bootstrap their liquidity because there's basically no requirement for them. There's no listing fee or any like KYC procedure, for example. So for us, for Tokenlon, actually, we feel if there's Uniswap is already doing a good job, we don't really see that we have to catch up with Uniswap. We are really focusing on expanding the space, bringing more users into the space. So what we are doing right now is actually integrating with Uniswap, source liquidity from them, so we can offer more assets for our users to trade, and we can grow together. And I remember, I don't remember who said that on Twitter, that if we zoom out a little bit, we are actually all on the same team.
Does anybody else would like to answer that question?
I would
like.
Sorry, just few words from my side. I see like Uniswap is doing magic. So like 20,000 wallets using every day. This is really magic. We from our side, we don't understand how they do that, but they do it somehow. Yeah, the user don't get the best price on the market, but still using Uniswap, and this is kind of premium, brand premium, and they do a really great job from my point of view.
I want to touch on two things. One are AMMs in general, and two is Uniswap. I think for AMMs, like I definitely underestimated them a lot in the past, and I think a big part of their success is just that they are very, very easy to use. Like even if the user doesn't necessarily understand the risks and rewards involved in using them, they're just dead simple, and they also enable users to do something they could not do on a centralized exchange, which is provide liquidity. Like the average user is not going to be able to set up a market making bot and provide liquidity, but they could just very easily dump their funds into Uniswap. So I think that's a big part of it, and I think there probably always will be some demand for providing liquidity in that way. Returns probably go down over time, but I think long run AMMs are probably here to stay. I think the question is like what percent overall market are they going to make up? I think with Uniswap in particular, I feel like they kind of memed their way into success almost. Like it's very clearly not the best AMM protocol at a technical level. It's not there's nothing particularly special about their pricing algorithm that allows them to outcompete everyone else. There are plenty of others that do more consistently outcompete Uniswap pricing, but it just kind of like became this shelling point for the ecosystem, and all like the liquidity mining programs and stuff just pointed at Uniswap. And I think that was is essentially a lot of free marketing for them, and I think ultimately a pretty huge part of their success. But I think over time, I think that the opportunity is growing to the point where it's very, very large, and more sophisticated liquidity providers are looking at the space now, Whereas a year ago, like the opportunity side was just not there for them, and it like probably wasn't even worth it for them to build the infrastructure required to provide liquidity. So I think the success of Uniswap is actually going to attract liquidity providers, more professional liquidity providers who are using more off-chain systems like RFQ systems, who are actually going to be able to pretty consistently outcompete on pricing with much less capital. And I think aggregators are just going to end up driving a larger percentage of their volume through those systems.
Yeah, I think that was a very good perspective. I think with Uniswap, the algorithm, although very simple, it's actually fundamentally pretty good. Like it's fundamentally pretty good in terms of both like in terms of the balance between providing market depth and earning some interest on what you provide, and yeah, so and also they were pretty early, so they've acquired quite a good user base. So they've got this all premium, and then once they've got the brand premium, it's if some algorithm. If some AMM wants to compete with them, they should outcompete on the fundamental level by quite a bit. So as I said, like if we compare Sushi and Uniswap, the difference between like with the same algorithm, the difference between like the volume to TVL ratios is factor of 2.5. So if someone wants to compete with Uniswap, they would have to have algorithm which is at least 3 times more efficient either on like APY, which you are getting for the same liquidity, or on market depth, or actually better both. A good example would be Dodo, which I think is not managing to compete, and I will explain the reason in a moment. So they use external price feeds as kind of price oracle and build liquidity around that with tighter spreads. That works great for as a liquidity source, because like you could an aggregator would drive volume there, because it's kind of with smaller deposits you have you kind of more often have traffic going through them, so that's great. But at the same time, because they use price oracle on chain and on Ethereum, it will be always like 10 seconds behind just because of the block time. They are probably doomed to lose money because of the front running problem. And of course, they can increase spreads and do some other tricks to avoid that, but then it becomes not so efficient. So they don't seem to be out competing on the fundamental algorithm problem. Although on the surface it could be seen as, yes, they are providing a deeper liquidity for the same deposits, so more efficient. But apparently, if I upload money there and look at how the money grow, they actually don't. And on Uniswap they do. So, and that's because of this front-running problem. So that they didn't actually solve the algorithm must be better problem. So if algorithm, and basically before an algorithm which is better than that fundamentally appears, one wouldn't be able to compete with Uniswap on efficiency of the AMM. A good example is Balancer, because Balancer seems to be going a little bit orthogonal way. The algorithm is just as efficient as Uniswap's if you have like 50-50 ratio. And you, of course, can provide multiple assets. That's also great. But I think the way they are going is to basically say, look, you can make your own pools with any fees, any ratios, and use those pools to manage your portfolios. So you just get your portfolios rebalanced and earn a little premium on fees. And that sounds like a very good proposition, because maybe you don't have to have 50% ETH, 50% BTC. You may want to have, I don't know, a portfolio of multiple tokens and let them earn money for you. And that's what Balancer does. And although it's less efficient than Uniswap, it's making a useful thing for those who want to store their portfolio. And that's their way to compete, and which is not kind of fundamentally the algorithmic way to compete. It's kind of more like addressing certain certain fraction of the market, but that's a good one.
I would also like to add, I fully agree. You have to, if you build new AMM, you have to be like 2-3 times more efficient than Uniswap right now with the same liquidity, and to get the same liquidity is quite hard. Yeah. So yeah, we experimented also in the beginning of this year with the oracles, similar to what Banker released, and we found out that's not the way, and there's a lot of room to innovate from our point of view in the AMM space. So, and
yeah, I think Uniswap's success boils down to 2 main points. One, I think a lot of the rest of them also covered this, is its simplicity for both the end users as well as for liquidity providers. And secondly, it's the permissionless liquidity contribution. The fact that anybody that wants to do liquidity mining, they can actually just reward their anonymous LPs depositing liquidity on Uniswap with even more tokens. And that, like Amir mentioned earlier, it helps in the whole marketing for Uniswap. So, but in the long run, as you can tell from Michael's explanations from different liquidity sources like Balancer, Curve, Uniswap, in the long run, there's going to be, at least in my opinion, there are going to be a lot of different types of AMMs, different types of liquidity sources altogether. There's already, Bancor is trying to innovate when it comes to reducing impermanent loss. There's CoFix coming up. There's Dodo. Personally, I'm LP in Curve and Uniswap as well, along with Kyber. So it really, in the long run, there are going to be so many different liquidity sources, and each might offer something different. So in my opinion, and what Kyber is also, at least our approach when it comes to working with all these different protocols, is to connect them, at least the on-chain ones that can work with Kyber's protocol, and provide the, to pull all this liquidity from different sources and make it easier for aggregators and dApps to access this liquidity. And we have been doing some research with members of the DeFi Alliance and professional market makers. Professional market makers cannot work with AMMs at all, right? Because they do not offer any control over the pricing, and in terms of capital efficiency, it's very, it's not very high. So, and typically order books are the most efficient for market making. But when you bring them fully on chain, there are going to be a lot of issues and challenges. So what we realized talking with professional market makers is that for them to actually come and onboard to DeFi, there needs to be other, more advanced systems which cater to their unique needs. They need to be able to build their own bots, algorithms, and customize their trading strategy, adjust their risk exposure. So all these different advanced techniques can't be done with just typical AMMs. There needs to be new, innovative, advanced sources, liquidity systems in the future. And that's my opinion. But definitely AMMs will be here to stay, because just the simplicity of liquidity provision appeals to the majority of the space. And right now, the volume is really very high. Uniswap does 400 in its biggest day, 400 million in one day, even more than Coinbase Pro, if I'm not wrong. And total DeFi value locked is already 14 billion. So, but right now it's just a fraction, all right, of DeFi's full potential. So in the future, with more liquidity sources, with more retail users coming to the space, I think yeah, it's not a winner take all, right? It's just a reference to your previous question.
Great,
I
great
think a good
perspective, everybody.
question.
Sorry, Michael. We're up on the end of time, so I'm gonna have to close up your question there. I do want to wrap up with one final question. I'd love if you could keep this short. What I'd love to ask each of you is, this year has been, it's obviously been a year of a lot of dynamism, a lot of change. It's been a very challenging year, but it's also been a very good year for crypto, and we've all learned a tremendous amount from what's happened, not just over the course of the entire year, but particularly in DeFi summer. So I'd love to ask each of you is, what is one lesson that your company or protocol is taking away from what you saw and learned about in DeFi summer? Michael, actually, maybe you could start.
Yeah, that's a pretty tricky question, because you couldn't boil it down to one thing learned.
if you had to, say, for a panel.
Yeah, but yeah, I guess one thing we've learned is that things can go significantly more decentralized than one would have thought. And first, when DAOs appeared, they were kind of unutilized and not used that way. And I think this DeFi summer, it really helped DAOs to kick off. And that's really the way to go into the future.
Amir.
Oh yeah, also hard to boil it down into a single thing. But yeah, I would say a lot of our approach has been validated this year. Like around the end of last year is when we started building 0x API, which is our developer-facing aggregation product. And we've seen aggregators really take off this year. We've also just seen, as the total volumes in the space grow, that like these off-chain systems and RFQ systems are actually able to consistently outcompete. The market share of those systems is growing as well. So yeah, I think ultimately, just saw our approaches being kind of validated over time.
Great. Sergej.
Yeah, we recognize that security is a very important topic. So we have seen a lot of hacks, and we are very experienced in smart contracts. I have hit my co-founder and Michael the Zoom. You know them for sure. They are also auditors, and so we everything what we wrote, we did we ordered like 11 audits for the last smart contract to just ensure that we didn't do any mistakes. Like Michael said, it's very important to keep everything safe, and not lose the trust. So we have seen other products lost trust to the users just because stupid hacks, also complicated hacks, it can happen, and to avoid that, we ensure that we are safe. We just ordered with the whole money we can afford for that, like a lot of audits, and we keep doing that. And I hope that next year we will have more security companies offering better quality. So we see also really poor quality on the security audits, this was less lesson for us. Keep safe. Don't trust any auditors who write everything safe. It can be because humans write that.
It's a good lesson to take away. Shane, what has Kyber learned from DeFi summer?
I think I would boil it down to like innovation with collaboration. I guess that's one way to put it. So I think a lot of the interesting use cases and value propositions that came up this year were not around last year, right? Kyber, we came up with a Kyber Pro framework only after research and innovation with the DeFi Alliance. 0x came up with the API, which is great for other developers to integrate. One Inch has come up with the V2. They have private transactions recently. Curve, when I met Michael back in ETH SG, when he was representing New Cipher there, Curve wasn't around, right? Maybe he thought of the idea back then. But so like just constant innovation, DeFi space moves so fast. We really need to be adaptable. And this is something that Kyber learned during the DeFi summer, and that we want to bring forward to the new year.
Great. And Lucas, I'll give you the last word. What has Tokenlon learned from DeFi Summer?
Yeah, sure. I think the biggest lesson we learned from this DeFi Summer is that token is such a powerful growth hacking tool. We saw this all these folks happening, this yield farming. They are all distributing their tokens in some way, driving the incentives. So that's also the reason why we are also launching our own token. We are using this as a growth tool. And also I want to mention that it's also taught us that it's better for projects to have something in the pocket. Don't give away your incentives all at once. You need to be prepared if there's another protocol projects trying to fork you, steal your users away. It's better you have something in your pocket to defend.
Very great points. Okay, I think that's the end of the panel. Thank you so much, everybody, for participating. This has been a fantastic discussion. And thank you very much to Tokenlon for hosting this and putting this event together. It's been great. I'm Haseeb from Dragonfly, and that's it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Haseeb.
Yep.
Thanks,
everyone.
All right.
Keep
Take care, guys. That was great.